The wedding dress felt like a prison. Victoria Bennett stood in the bridal suite of the Grand Riverside Hotel, staring at her reflection in the full-length mirror, barely recognizing the woman looking back at her. The ivory silk gown, custom-made in Paris, fit her perfectly, too perfectly, as if it had been designed to trap her in a life she never wanted. Outside the door, she could hear her mother's shrill voice coordinating with the wedding planner, ensuring every detail of what was supposed to be the social event of the season went flawlessly. But Victoria's hands were trembling, and it had nothing to do with pre-wedding jitters. She had known Marcus Rothwell for exactly 8 months. Their families had introduced them at a charity gala, and within weeks, her father had orchestrated their engagement. Marcus was handsome, wealthy, and came from one of Boston's oldest families. On paper, he was perfect. In reality, he was controlling, dismissive, and had made it abundantly clear that once they were married, Victoria's dreams of opening her own art gallery would be hobbies she could pursue when time permitted. He had laughed when she suggested keeping her maiden name, and his eyes had gone cold when she'd asked about a prenuptial agreement that would protect her inheritance from her grandmother. The realization had hit her 3 days ago. She didn't love Marcus. She didn't even like him, and the thought of spending the rest of her life as Mrs. Marcus Rothwell made her feel like she was drowning. A sharp knock on the door made her jump. "Victoria, darling, 15 minutes!" her mother called out. "The photographer wants to get shots of you before the ceremony. Just a moment." Victoria's voice came out steadier than she felt. Her heart was pounding so hard, she thought it might burst through the delicate lace bodice of her gown. She had to get out. Now. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend, Rachel. "You okay? You looked pale during the rehearsal dinner last night." Victoria's fingers flew across the screen. "I can't do this. I can't marry him." The response came immediately. "Then don't. I'm in the parking garage. Black SUV, 3rd level. Come now." But before Victoria could respond, she heard her mother's voice again, this time closer, talking to the wedding planner right outside her door. They would be coming in any second. The hotel room had only one exit, and it led directly to where her mother stood. Panic seized her chest. She looked around desperately. The window didn't open. The bathroom had no escape route. Her eyes fell on the service door she'd noticed earlier, partially hidden behind a decorative screen. Without thinking, she grabbed her phone and small clutch purse and ran. The service corridor was dimly lit and smelled of cleaning supplies. Victoria lifted the heavy skirts of her gown and moved as quickly as she could, her heart hammering against her ribs. Behind her, she heard her mother's voice calling her name, first questioning, then alarmed. She burst through a door and found herself in a loading area. The late afternoon sun momentarily blinded her. Several vehicles were parked nearby. Delivery trucks, staff cars, and one sleek black luxury car with its trunk partially open. Without hesitation, driven by pure instinct and desperation, Victoria looked around quickly, saw no one, and made a decision that would change her life forever. She climbed into the trunk. It was larger than she expected, clearly designed with comfort in mind. This was no ordinary vehicle, but a high-end luxury car with a spacious cargo area. She pulled the trunk lid down as far as she could without latching it completely, leaving just enough gap for air. Her wedding dress created a cloud of silk and tulle around her in the darkness. She could hear her own breathing, rapid and shallow. Minutes passed. Or maybe it was seconds. Time felt warped in her panic. She heard voices outside, distant and muffled, then footsteps approaching. A car door opened and closed. The engine purred to life with barely a whisper of sound. And then they were moving. Victoria lay perfectly still, trying to process what she'd just done. She'd climbed into a stranger's car to escape her own wedding. Her mother must be frantic by now. Marcus was probably pacing in the groom's suite, checking his watch with that impatient expression he always wore. 300 guests were seated in the hotel's grand ballroom, waiting for a ceremony that would never happen. The car moved smoothly through what she assumed were the hotel's streets, then picked up speed. They were on a highway. Victoria tried to calculate. Rachel's SUV had been in the parking garage. This wasn't Rachel's car. This was someone else's vehicle entirely, and she had no idea who was driving or where they were going. The reality of her situation began to sink in. She'd acted on pure impulse, driven by desperation and fear. Now she was trapped in the trunk of a stranger's car, wearing a wedding dress worth $20,000, with no plan and no idea what would happen next. The car continued to accelerate. They were definitely on a major highway now. She could feel the steady rhythm of the road beneath them. Minutes turned into what felt like an hour. Victoria's legs were cramping, and the initial surge of adrenaline was fading, replaced by a different kind of fear. Who was driving this car? Where were they going? What would happen when they finally stopped and opened the trunk? She thought about Marcus, probably calling her phone repeatedly by now. She'd left it on silent, but she could feel it buzzing occasionally in her clutch. Her mother would be devastated, not because Victoria was missing, but because of the scandal, the embarrassment in front of Boston's elite society. Her father would be coldly furious, calculating the damage to his business relationships with the Rothwell family. But even as anxiety clawed at her chest, Victoria felt something else too, a strange, unexpected sense of freedom. For the first time in 8 months, maybe for the first time in her entire 26 years, she'd made a choice that was completely her own. Consequences be damned, the car began to slow down. Victoria's entire body tensed. They were exiting the highway. She could feel the turns, the stops and starts of local traffic. Then they turned onto what felt like a smooth, private road. The car finally came to a stop, and the engine cut off. She heard the driver's door open and close. Footsteps on gravel. They were coming around to the back of the car. Victoria held her breath, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain it could be heard outside. The trunk lid lifted, flooding her hiding spot with late afternoon light, and Victoria found herself staring up at the most striking man she'd ever seen. He was tall, probably in his mid-30s, with dark hair and sharp features that seemed carved from stone. He wore an impeccably tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. His eyes, a piercing gray blue, widened in shock as he took in the sight before him. A woman in a wedding dress, crumpled in the trunk of his car. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They simply stared at each other, the absurdity of the situation hanging in the air between them. Then the man's expression shifted from shock to something that might have been amusement. One dark eyebrow arched upward. "Well," he said, his voice deep and smooth with a hint of dry humor. "This is certainly a first. I've had many unexpected things happen in my life, but finding a runaway bride in my trunk is definitely a new experience." Victoria struggled to sit up, her dress creating a rustling symphony of silk and tulle. "I can explain," she began, though she had absolutely no idea how to explain any of this. "I certainly hope so," the man replied, extending a hand to help her out, "because I've just driven 70 miles, and I'm very curious to know exactly how you ended up in my car." Victoria accepted his hand, grateful for the assistance as she climbed out of the trunk with as much dignity as a woman emerging from a car's cargo area in a wedding dress could manage. Her legs were stiff from being cramped in the confined space, and she stumbled slightly. The man's grip steadied her, his hand warm and firm. "Thank you," she said, finally getting her feet properly under her. She looked around, trying to orient herself. They were in a circular driveway in front of what could only be described as a mansion, a sprawling estate of glass and stone that seemed to emerge organically from the landscape around it. The property was surrounded by woods, and she could glimpse the ocean in the distance. "Where are we?" "My house," he replied simply, still studying her with those penetrating gray-blue eyes. "About 70 miles north of Boston in Cape Ann. And you are?" "Victoria," she said, then hesitated. Her full name would be instantly recognizable. The Bennett family was prominent in Boston's social circles, and by now, her disappearance from her own wedding was probably making headlines. Victoria Bennett. Something flickered in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, though he didn't comment on it. "Christopher Ashford," he said. "And I'm going to ask again. How did you end up in my trunk?" Victoria felt heat rise to her cheeks. I needed to escape. There was a wedding, my wedding, and I couldn't go through with it. I saw your car in the loading area behind the hotel, and the trunk was open, and She trailed off, realizing how insane it all sounded. "You just decided to hide in a stranger's car," Christopher finished for her, his tone unreadable. "I panicked," Victoria admitted. "I know it was irrational and probably illegal, and I'm sorry. If you could just call me a cab, I'll get out of your hair." Christopher crossed his arms, regarding her thoughtfully. "A cab. To take you where, exactly? Back to the wedding you just ran away from?" Victoria faltered. She hadn't thought that far ahead. A hotel, maybe, or the train station. Wearing a wedding dress and with, I'm assuming, no luggage, no change of clothes, and possibly no money? Victoria clutched her small purse defensively. I have my credit cards, which your family can track the moment you use them, Christopher pointed out. I may not know the details of your situation, but I can guess enough. Prominent Boston family, society wedding, and a bride desperate enough to hide in a stranger's trunk. Your disappearance is probably all over the news by now. He was right, of course. Victoria felt the weight of reality crashing down on her. What had she done? Her impulsive escape had bought her a couple of hours at most, but she had nowhere to go, no plan, nothing. Come inside, Christopher said, his tone softening slightly. You look like you're about to collapse. We can figure out your next steps once you've had a chance to breathe. Victoria wanted to refuse. She'd already imposed on this stranger enough. But her legs were shaking, and she realized she hadn't eaten anything since breakfast. The wedding had been scheduled for 4 o'clock, and it had to be well past 6 now. Okay, she said quietly. Thank you. Christopher led her through massive oak doors into a foyer that took her breath away. The house was stunning. Modern architecture blended seamlessly with natural elements. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the ocean, and the interior was decorated with carefully curated art pieces that Victoria's trained eye immediately recognized as valuable originals. You have excellent taste in art, she said without thinking. Thank you. I'm something of a collector. Christopher gestured toward a sitting room off the foyer. Please, make yourself comfortable. Can I get you something to drink? Water? Wine? Something stronger? Water would be wonderful, Victoria said, sinking gratefully onto a leather sofa that probably cost more than her first car. Christopher disappeared, returning moments later with a glass of water and what looked like sparkling wine for himself. He'd removed his suit jacket and loosened his tie, making him look slightly less intimidating and somehow even more attractive. So, he said, settling into a chair across from her. Victoria Bennett, I'm going to take a guess here. You were supposed to marry Marcus Rothwell today. Victoria's eyes widened. You know Marcus? Of him, Christopher corrected. We move in similar circles, though I can't say I know him personally. I do know his reputation, however. His expression darkened slightly. If you were running away from marrying him, I'd say you made the right choice, even if your method was unconventional. What do you mean? Victoria asked, leaning forward. Christopher hesitated, as if weighing how much to say. Marcus Rothwell has a reputation in certain business circles. He's known for being controlling, aggressive in his business dealings. There were rumors about his last relationship, the woman before you. She left Boston entirely after they broke up, and she wouldn't talk about what happened. A chill ran down Victoria's spine. She'd sensed something off about Marcus, but she'd dismissed it as pre-wedding nerves. Her parents had been so thrilled with the match, so proud of the alliance between the Bennett and Rothwell families. She'd let herself be swept along by their enthusiasm, ignoring her own instincts. I didn't know, she said softly. I knew something wasn't right. He was possessive, dismissive of my career goals, but I didn't know there was someone before me. There usually is, Christopher said. Men like Marcus don't change their patterns. He studied her carefully. What were you planning to do? Long term, I mean. Surely you knew you couldn't hide in my trunk forever. Despite everything, Victoria felt a laugh bubble up. Honestly, I wasn't thinking long term. I was thinking about the next 5 minutes, then the next 5 after that. I just knew I couldn't walk down that aisle. A sound instinct, Christopher said. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, then turned it toward her. You should probably see this. Victoria took the phone, her stomach dropping as she saw the headline. Bennett heiress vanishes hours before society wedding. Below it was a photo of her from the engagement announcement, smiling a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The article was sparse on details but heavy on speculation. Everything from cold feet to foul play was mentioned. They've called the police, she whispered, scrolling through the article. Marcus filed a missing person report. My mother gave a statement saying I would never just leave, that something terrible must have happened. Would you? Christopher asked. Just leave, I mean. if you'd had the courage to do it the conventional way. Victoria looked up at him, surprised by the directness of the question. I don't know, she admitted. I wanted to. I've wanted to for weeks. But disappointing my parents, dealing with the scandal, breaking the engagement, it all seemed impossible. Everyone expected me to go through with it. So I was going to go through with it, even though every cell in my body was screaming that it was wrong, until you climbed into my trunk, Christopher said with a hint of a smile. Until I climbed into your trunk, Victoria agreed. She handed his phone back to him. I should call them. Let them know I'm safe, at least. Are you sure that's what you want to do? Christopher asked. Because the moment you make that call, the decision is out of your hands. Your parents will come get you, Marcus will be there, and you'll be right back where you started, except now, with even more pressure to go through with the wedding to avoid the embarrassment of calling it off. Victoria knew he was right. Her father was a master of manipulation, and her mother would cry and guilt her into compliance. Marcus would be understanding and forgiving in public, while making it clear in private that this kind of behavior would not be tolerated in their marriage. What do you suggest? She asked. Christopher leaned back in his chair, regarding her thoughtfully. I suggest you take the night to think. You're safe here. No one knows where you are. In the morning, when you've had time to process everything, you can make a clear-headed decision about what you really want to do. You're offering to let me stay here? A complete stranger who broke into your car? Technically, you broke into my trunk, not my car, Christopher corrected with amusement. And yes, I'm offering. I have plenty of space, and frankly, I'm curious to see how this situation plays out. It's been a long time since anything has surprised me. Victoria studied him, trying to understand his motivations. Christopher Ashford. The name was familiar, now that she thought about it. She'd heard it in connection with technology investments, real estate development, maybe venture capital. He was wealthy, clearly, and moved in the same social circles as her family, even if they'd never met before today. Why are you helping me? She asked directly. Christopher was quiet for a moment, and something complicated crossed his face. Let's just say I understand what it's like to feel trapped by other people's expectations, he finally said, and leave it at that. Before Victoria could respond, her clutch purse began to buzz insistently. She pulled out her phone. 17 missed calls from her mother, 12 from Marcus, 8 from her father, and countless texts ranging from worried to angry to pleading. The most recent text was from Marcus. Victoria, wherever you are, we can work this out. I love you. Please come back. She stared at the words, feeling nothing. He didn't love her. He loved the idea of her, the perfect society wife from the right family with the right connections. He'd never once asked her what she wanted, what she dreamed about, what made her truly happy. I'll stay, Victoria said, looking up at Christopher. Just for tonight, and thank you. You're welcome, Christopher said, standing. Now, let's get you out of that dress and into something more comfortable. I'm sure I can find something that will work temporarily. As Victoria followed him up the sweeping staircase to the second floor, she felt the strangest sensation. Not quite relief, not quite fear, but something in between. She'd jumped off a cliff, and she had no idea where she would land. But for the first time in months, she felt like she was finally in control of her own life. She just hoped she wouldn't regret it. Christopher led Victoria down a hallway lined with more impressive artwork. A Rothko that made her pause, a series of black and white photographs that looked like vintage Ansel Adams prints. He stopped at a door near the end of the hall and pushed it open. Guest suite, he said. Bathroom's through there and I'll find some clothes for you. They'll be too large, but better than a wedding dress. The room was beautiful, understated luxury with a massive bed, more ocean views, and a sitting area with built-in bookshelves. Victoria walked to the window, looking out at the darkening sky over the water. The sun was setting, painting the horizon in shades of orange and pink. It's beautiful here, she said softly. It's my sanctuary, Christopher replied. I bought this property 5 years ago when I needed to escape the city. There's something about the ocean that puts things in perspective. He disappeared, returning a few minutes later with sweatpants, a t-shirt, and a soft hoodie. These will be enormous on you, but they're clean and comfortable. Take your time. I'll be downstairs when you're ready. After he left, Victoria peeled herself out of the wedding dress with relief. It took several minutes to undo all the tiny buttons and hooks. The dress had been designed to require assistance. Another small way Marcus had wanted her to be dependent on others. She left it pooled on the floor like a discarded cocoon and stepped into the bathroom. The shower was hot and wonderful. Victoria stood under the spray for a long time, washing away the makeup, the hairspray, the carefully constructed image of the perfect bride. When she finally emerged and looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Without all the wedding preparations, she looked younger, more vulnerable, but also somehow more real. She dressed in Christopher's clothes, which were indeed enormous. The sweatpants had to be rolled several times, and the t-shirt hung nearly to her knees. But they were soft and comfortable, and she felt more like herself than she had in months. When she came downstairs, she found Christopher in a spacious kitchen cooking. The smell of garlic and herbs filled the air. "I hope you're hungry," he said, looking up from the stove. "I'm making pasta. Nothing fancy, but comfort food seemed appropriate for the occasion." "It smells amazing," Victoria said, sliding onto a stool at the kitchen island. "You cook?" "I live alone and I like to eat well," Christopher replied with a shrug. It seemed like a practical skill to develop. He glanced at her, and something in his expression softened. "You look more comfortable." "I feel more human," Victoria admitted. "Thank you again for all of this. I know it's incredibly strange." "Strange is relative," Christopher said, stirring the pasta. "I once had a business partner show up at my office with a llama to make a point about diversification. A runaway bride in my trunk barely makes the top 10. Victoria laughed, surprising herself. "There's a story there. Several stories, actually. The llama incident was just the beginning." Christopher plated the pasta, adding fresh parmesan and herbs. "Come on, let's eat in the dining room. Or we can eat out on the terrace if you're not too cold." "Terrace sounds perfect," Victoria said. They settled at a table on the stone terrace overlooking the ocean. The air was cool, but not uncomfortable, and the sound of waves provided a peaceful backdrop. Victoria took her first bite of pasta and nearly moaned. It was delicious, simple, but perfectly executed. "This is incredible," she said. "Where did you learn to cook?" "Italy, mostly," Christopher said. "I spent a year in Tuscany after college, supposedly learning about wine investments, but actually just absorbing the culture. An old woman named Francesca took pity on me and taught me her family recipes. She said no man should be helpless in a kitchen." "Wise woman," Victoria said. She took another bite, then asked the question that had been nagging at her. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why were you at the Grand Riverside Hotel today?" "That's where I was supposed to get married." Christopher's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "I was meeting someone," he said carefully. "A business associate." Something in his tone made Victoria suspicious, but before she could press further, her phone buzzed again. She'd left it on the kitchen counter, but the sound carried through the open door. Christopher glanced toward the house. "You should probably turn that off," he said. "Or at least silence it completely. They're not going to stop calling." "You're right." Victoria stood, retrieved her phone, and stared at the screen. 32 missed calls now. And the texts were becoming more desperate. Her mother's latest message read, "Victoria Ann Bennett, you are breaking my heart. Please, please call me. I need to know you're safe." The guilt hit her hard. Whatever her feelings about the wedding, her mother did love her in her own complicated way. Victoria typed out a quick message. "I'm safe. I'm sorry. I need time to think. Please don't look for me. I'll contact you soon." She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then turned off the phone completely. When she returned to the terrace, Christopher was watching the ocean, his expression thoughtful. "Did you contact them?" "I sent my mother a text," Victoria said, "just to let her know I'm alive. Then I turned off the phone." "That was brave," Christopher said, "and the right thing to do." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the tension slowly easing from Victoria's shoulders. The pasta, the wine Christopher had poured, the sound of the ocean, it all combined to create a sense of peace she hadn't felt in months. "Can I ask you something now?" Christopher said eventually. "Fair's fair," Victoria replied. "What were you planning to do with your life? Before the wedding, before Marcus?" What did Victoria Bennett actually want? The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in so long. "I wanted to open an art gallery," she said softly. "A real one. not a vanity project. I studied art history at Columbia, and I spent 2 years working at Sotheby's in their contemporary art division. I have an eye for emerging artists, and I had this whole business plan worked out. There's a space in the South End that would be perfect. Lots of natural light, good foot traffic, near other galleries but not too saturated. Had? Christopher picked up on the past tense. What happened? My father happened, Victoria said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. He said it was a waste of my education and his money. He wanted me to join the family business, Bennett Properties. Real estate development. I tried it for 6 months and hated every minute. Then he introduced me to Marcus, and suddenly everyone had a new plan for my life. And you went along with it, Christopher observed, but there was no judgment in his tone. I went along with it, Victoria confirmed, because it was easier than fighting, because I was tired of disappointing everyone. Because at some point I stopped believing that what I wanted actually mattered. She looked up at Christopher, feeling tears prick her eyes. How pathetic is that? It's not pathetic, Christopher said firmly. It's human. We all get caught up in other people's expectations sometimes. The question is what you do when you finally realize you've lost yourself. Like hiding in a stranger's trunk, Victoria said with a weak laugh. Exactly like hiding in a stranger's trunk, Christopher agreed, smiling. Unconventional, but effective. Victoria took a sip of her wine, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. What about you? What does Christopher Ashford want? Christopher was quiet for a long moment, and Victoria wondered if she'd overstepped, but then he spoke, his voice lower, more reflective. I want freedom, he said finally. From expectations, from the constant pressure to grow the business, expand, acquire, compete. I built my company from nothing, started with a single investment in a tech startup when I was 25, and it snowballed from there. Now I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, and people constantly want more from me. More investments, more acquisitions, more public appearances, more everything. He gestured around them. This house is supposed to be my escape. But even here, I can't fully disconnect. Is that why you were at the hotel today? Victoria asked. The business meeting? Christopher's jaw tightened. Something like that. He stood abruptly. More wine? Victoria recognized evasion when she saw it, but she didn't push. They'd both shared enough vulnerability for one evening. Sure, thank you. As Christopher disappeared inside, Victoria's mind drifted back to the hotel, to the moment she'd seen his car. Something about the timing nagged at her. The loading area had been relatively empty. Most vendor deliveries would have been completed hours before the wedding, so why had Christopher's car been there? When he returned with the wine bottle, she asked casually, Your business meeting, was it at the hotel? In one of the conference rooms? Christopher poured the wine carefully, not meeting her eyes. Not exactly. Christopher, Victoria said gently, where were you at the hotel? He set down the wine bottle and finally looked at her. In the dim light from the house, his expression was unreadable. I was invited to your wedding, he said quietly. Victoria's breath caught. What? Marcus Rothwell invited me, Christopher continued. We're not friends, but we have mutual business connections. It would have been notable if I hadn't attended. I went to the hotel, but I couldn't make myself go inside. I sat in my car in the loading area for 20 minutes, trying to decide what to do. Why couldn't you go inside? Victoria asked, though something in her already knew the answer. Christopher met her eyes. Because I've met Marcus's previous girlfriend, Caroline Mitchell. She came to me 6 months after they broke up, asking if I had any job opportunities outside of Boston. She needed to leave the city, she said. But she wouldn't tell me why. The fear in her eyes. He shook his head. I gave her a position in my San Francisco office. She's thriving there now, but she still won't talk about what Marcus did to her. Victoria felt cold despite the warm evening air. You knew, she whispered. You knew what kind of man he was, and you came to the wedding anyway? I came to the wedding to stop it, Christopher said, his voice intense. I couldn't let another woman make the same mistake Caroline did. I was sitting in my car, working up the courage to find you and tell you everything I knew about Marcus, when you literally fell into my trunk. The revelation hung between them, changing everything. This wasn't a random act of kindness from a stranger. Christopher had come to save her, and she had unknowingly saved herself. That's why you helped me so easily, Victoria said. Why you brought me here. Why you're being so understanding. You were already planning to intervene. Yes, Christopher admitted. Though I have to say, your method was far more dramatic than anything I had planned. Despite everything, Victoria felt a laugh bubble up. The absurdity of the situation, the timing, the coincidence, the sheer impossibility of it all, was almost too much to process. So what now? She asked. You've saved the damsel in distress, even if she ended up saving herself. Where do we go from here? Christopher looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. Something that made Victoria's heart skip a beat. That, he said softly, is entirely up to you. Victoria woke to sunlight streaming through the guest room windows and the sound of seagulls crying over the ocean. For a moment, she was disoriented. The bed was too comfortable, the room too beautiful, everything too peaceful. Then the memories of the previous day came flooding back, and she sat up abruptly. She'd run away from her wedding. She'd hidden in Christopher Ashford's trunk. She'd spent the evening with a man who had planned to stop her wedding because he knew things about Marcus that made her blood run cold. Her phone was still off, sitting on the nightstand like a live grenade. Victoria picked it up, her thumb hovering over the power button. Did she really want to know what had happened in the hours since her escape? What her parents were saying? What Marcus was doing? How the media was spinning her disappearance? A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Victoria? Are you awake? Christopher's voice was gentle. I have coffee and breakfast if you're interested. Give me 5 minutes, she called back, climbing out of bed. She splashed water on her face, ran her fingers through her tangled hair, and pulled on the hoodie over Christopher's t-shirt. When she opened the door, Christopher was waiting in the hallway, looking unfairly handsome in jeans and a casual button-down shirt. Good morning, he said with a slight smile. How did you sleep? Better than I expected, Victoria admitted. Better than I have in weeks, actually. They went down to the kitchen, where Christopher had laid out an impressive breakfast. Fresh fruit, croissants, scrambled eggs, and coffee that smelled like heaven. Victoria realized she was starving. You didn't have to do all this, she said, sliding onto a stool at the island. I was up early anyway, Christopher said, pouring her coffee. I'm not much of a sleeper, and I figured you'd need sustenance for whatever comes next. Victoria took a sip of coffee, gathering her courage. I need to turn on my phone, she said. Face the music, as they say. Are you sure you're ready? Christopher asked, his gray-blue eyes serious. No, Victoria said honestly. But I can't hide forever. I made a choice yesterday, and now I need to deal with the consequences. Christopher nodded. I'll be right here if you need support. Victoria powered on her phone, and immediately it began buzzing with a barrage of notifications. 73 missed calls, over 100 text messages, multiple voicemails, and several news alerts with her name in the headlines. She started with the texts from her mother, scrolling through the progression from worried to frantic, to angry, to devastated. The most recent one, sent at 2 a.m, simply read, I don't understand why you're doing this to us. Her father's messages were colder, more controlled. You've embarrassed the family and destroyed an important business alliance. When you're ready to act like an adult, we can discuss how to repair the damage. But it was Marcus's messages that made her skin crawl. They'd started concerned and loving. But as the hours passed, they'd become increasingly possessive. You belong with me, Victoria. We're meant to be together. Whatever's scared you, we can work through it. I know you'll come back because you love me. You have to love me. The last message, sent just 3 hours ago, was the most disturbing. I know you're safe somewhere. You can't hide forever. We will be together, Victoria. It's destiny. Victoria's hands were shaking as she set down the phone. Christopher, who had been watching her face, immediately came around the island and placed a steady hand on her shoulder. What did he say? Christopher asked quietly. Victoria showed him the messages. Christopher's expression darkened as he read them, his jaw clenching. This is worse than I thought, he said. These aren't the messages of a man who's concerned about his missing fiancée. These are the messages of someone who views you as a possession. I need to call off the wedding officially, Victoria said, her voice stronger than she felt. Not just disappear. I need to end it clearly and publicly. Are you sure? Christopher asked. Once you do that, there's no going back. Your family will pressure you to reconsider. Marcus will try to manipulate you, and the media will have a field day. I'm sure, Victoria said. She thought about Caroline Mitchell, the woman who had fled Boston to escape Marcus. She thought about her own dreams, abandoned to please her parents. She thought about the woman she'd been becoming. Small, compliant, voiceless. I'm done living my life for other people. Christopher studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. Then let's do this strategically. You'll need a lawyer to handle the official termination of the engagement and to deal with any financial entanglements. You'll need a public statement to control the narrative. And you'll need a safe place to stay while everything settles. I can stay with Rachel, Victoria said, thinking of her best friend. She texted me yesterday offering to help. Actually, Christopher said slowly, I have a better idea, if you're interested. Victoria looked at him questioningly. Stay here, Christopher said. Not forever, obviously, but for a few weeks, until things calm down. You'll have privacy, space to figure out what you want to do next. And if Marcus or anyone else tries to find you, this property has excellent security. Christopher, I can't impose on you like that, Victoria protested, even as part of her desperately wanted to accept. You're not imposing, Christopher said firmly. I'm offering. Besides, I have a proposition for you. A proposition? Victoria raised an eyebrow. Christopher smiled. Remember you mentioned wanting to open an art gallery? I own several commercial properties in Boston, including one in the South End. I've been looking for the right tenant, someone with vision and passion who could turn it into something special. I'd like you to consider it. Victoria stared at him, certain she'd misheard. You want to give me a gallery space? Not give, lease, at favorable terms, Christopher corrected. I believe in investing in people with talent and drive. From what you told me last night, you have both. And frankly, I'd rather have an innovative art gallery in that space than another generic boutique. But you barely know me, Victoria said, overwhelmed. Why would you take that kind of risk? Christopher's expression became serious. Because I see someone who had the courage to choose herself over everyone else's expectations, even when it meant jumping into the unknown. That's the kind of person I want to work with. He paused. And because I understand what it's like to have a dream and feel like you have to sacrifice it for other people's approval. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it, Christopher suggested. First, we'll handle the immediate crisis. Then you can decide what you want your future to look like. Over the next few hours, with Christopher's help, Victoria made the calls she'd been dreading. She spoke with a lawyer Christopher recommended, who assured her that ending the engagement was legally straightforward. There was no shared property, no prenuptial agreement to contest, nothing binding her to Marcus beyond a broken promise. She called Rachel, who burst into tears of relief when she heard Victoria's voice. I've been so worried. Where are you? Are you okay? I'm safe, Victoria assured her. I'm with a friend. Rachel, I need you to know I'm not going back to Marcus. The wedding is off. Officially, permanently off. Thank God, Rachel breathed. Victoria, I never wanted to say anything because you seemed committed. But that man gave me the creeps, the way he looked at you sometimes, like you were something he owned. I know, Victoria said quietly. I see it now. I should have seen it sooner. The hardest call was to her mother. Victoria had prepared herself for tears, for guilt trips, for emotional manipulation. What she wasn't prepared for was the cold fury in her mother's voice. Do you have any idea what you've done? Her mother hissed. The humiliation, the scandal, the damage to our family's reputation. Marcus is devastated. Your father's business relationship with the Rothwells is destroyed. And for what, Victoria? Some childish panic attack? It wasn't a panic attack, Mom, Victoria said, keeping her voice steady. It was clarity. I don't love Marcus. I don't even like him. And I'm not going to marry him to salvage Dad's business deals or your social standing. You're being incredibly selfish, her mother snapped. You made a commitment. You owe it to everyone to see it through. I owe it to myself to be honest, Victoria countered. And the honest truth is that marrying Marcus would have been the biggest mistake of my life. There was a long silence. Then her mother said coldly, If you go through with this, don't expect your father's support, financial or otherwise. You'll be on your own. I understand, Victoria said, even as her heart sank. I'm sorry I've disappointed you, but I can't live my life to make you happy anymore. She hung up before her mother could respond, then sat staring at the phone, feeling the weight of what she'd just done. She'd severed ties with her family, ended her engagement, destroyed her carefully constructed life, all in less than 24 hours. Christopher appeared in the doorway, having given her privacy for the call. He took one look at her face and came to sit beside her. "That bad?" he asked gently. "They've cut me off," Victoria said, trying to keep her voice from shaking. "My father won't support me financially, which means no trust fund access, no family money, nothing." "Can they do that legally?" Christopher asked with a frown. "The trust fund doesn't fully vest until I'm 30 or married, whichever comes first," Victoria explained. "Until then, my father has discretionary control. It was supposed to be an incentive for me to make good choices." She laughed bitterly. "I guess running away from my own wedding doesn't qualify." "You still have your Sotheby's experience," Christopher pointed out. "You have skills, connections in the art world, knowledge. That's worth more than any trust fund." "Is it, though?" Victoria asked, feeling the fear creep in. "Without capital, I can't open a gallery. Without my family's backing, I lose credibility in Boston's art circles. I have about $15,000 in my personal account, and that's it." Christopher was quiet for a moment, then said, "What if I invested in your gallery?" Victoria's head snapped up. "What?" "Not a gift, not charity. A real investment," Christopher clarified. "You provide the expertise and vision, I provide the capital and the space. We structure it as a business partnership. You'd have creative control, but I'd have a financial stake in the success." "Christopher, you can't—" Victoria began. "I can, and I want to," Christopher interrupted. "Victoria, I've built my entire career on identifying potential and taking calculated risks. You're a calculated risk I'm willing to take." He smiled slightly. "Besides, it's been a long time since I've been excited about a new project. The idea of helping launch an innovative art gallery, working with someone who actually cares about art rather than just profit margins, it sounds like exactly what I need." Victoria searched his face, looking for pity or condescension, but found only sincerity. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. "Really?" Christopher considered the question carefully. "Because yesterday, you reminded me what courage looks like," he said finally. "I've been stuck in a comfortable rut, doing what's expected, expanding the business, because that's what successful people do. But I've lost sight of why I started in the first place, because I wanted to support innovation, take chances on unconventional ideas. You jumped into my trunk because you were desperate to escape a life that wasn't yours. Maybe helping you build the life you actually want will help me remember what I'm supposed to be doing with mine." Victoria felt something shift in her chest, a combination of gratitude, hope, and something else she couldn't quite name. She looked at this man who had accidentally become her rescuer, her ally, and now potentially her business partner. 24 hours ago, she'd been a bride preparing to marry the wrong man. Now she was sitting in a beautiful house by the ocean, discussing plans to build the life she'd always dreamed of. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "Let's do it. Let's open a gallery." Christopher's smile was genuine and warm. "Then we have a lot of work to do, but first, we need to handle Marcus." As if on cue, Victoria's phone rang. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. She looked at Christopher, who nodded encouragingly. She answered, putting it on speaker. "Victoria," Marcus's voice was smooth, controlled. "Thank God. I've been so worried about you. Where are you? I'll come get you right now." "I'm somewhere safe, Marcus," Victoria said calmly, "and I'm not coming back. The wedding is off. I'm sorry, but this is final." "Victoria, you're not thinking clearly," Marcus said, his tone becoming harder. "You're confused, maybe in shock. We can postpone the wedding, give you time to—" "I'm not confused," Victoria interrupted. "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months. I don't want to marry you, Marcus. I don't love you, and I don't think you really love me either. You love the idea of who you thought I would be, someone compliant and decorative who would fit perfectly into your life plan. But that's not who I am. You're making a huge mistake," Marcus said, his voice cold now. "Your family—" "My family will survive," Victoria said. "And so will you. Find someone who actually wants what you're offering, Marcus, because it's not me." She hung up before he could respond, then turned off the phone again. Her hands were shaking, but she felt strangely exhilarated. She'd done it. She'd actually ended it. Christopher was watching her with something like admiration. "That was well done," he said. "How do you feel?" "Terrified," Victoria admitted. "But also free. For the first time in my life, I have no idea what's going to happen next, and that's actually exciting rather than frightening. Then let's make it even more exciting," Christopher said, standing and offering his hand. "Come on, I want to show you something." He led her to his study, a beautiful room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a large desk with multiple monitors. Christopher pulled up several files on his computer: architectural plans, financial projections, photographs of a gorgeous space in Boston's South End with exposed brick, high ceilings, and massive windows. "This is the property I was telling you about," Christopher said. "It's been empty for 6 months because I've been waiting for the right vision. If you want it, it's yours. We can start renovations immediately, and you could be open within 3 months." Victoria stared at the images, her mind already filling the space with art, with light, with the exhibitions she'd always dreamed of curating. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Then it's settled," Christopher said. "Welcome to your new life, Victoria Bennett. I think it's going to be quite an adventure." 6 months later, Victoria stood in her gallery, Bennett Ashford Contemporary, putting the finishing touches on an exhibition by an emerging artist she'd discovered through a mutual friend. The gallery had exceeded even her optimistic projections, attracting serious collectors and art enthusiasts alike. Critics had praised her eye for talent and her innovative approach to curation. The door chimed, and Christopher walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. It had become their routine. He'd stop by every Friday afternoon, and they'd walk through the current exhibition together, discussing art and business and everything in between. "The space looks incredible," Christopher said, handing her a coffee. "This artist is going to be huge." "I know," Victoria said with a smile. "I can feel it." They'd become close over the past months, first as business partners, then as friends, and lately as something that felt like it might be evolving into more. Christopher had been patient, never pushing, letting Victoria heal from the trauma of her almost marriage and discover who she was without the weight of family expectations. "I got a wedding invitation today," Victoria said casually. "Rachel's getting married next spring. She wants me to be her maid of honor." "That's wonderful," Christopher said. "How do you feel about weddings these days?" "Better," Victoria admitted. "It helps that this one is actually about 2 people who love each other rather than a business merger disguised as a romance." She paused, then added, "I also heard from Caroline Mitchell. She saw an article about the gallery and reached out." Christopher's expression shifted. "How is she?" "Thriving, apparently. She thanked me for, in her words, having the courage to do what she couldn't. She said seeing someone actually escape Marcus helped her realize that what happened wasn't her fault." "I'm glad," Christopher said softly. She deserved better than what he put her through. They stood in comfortable silence, looking at the art surrounding them. Victoria thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, trapped, voiceless, preparing to make the biggest mistake of her life. Then she thought about the woman she was now, independent, creative, building something meaningful with her own hands and vision. "Thank you," she said suddenly, turning to Christopher. "For everything. For not turning me over to my parents when you found me in your trunk. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. For giving me a chance to build this." Christopher smiled, and there was something in his eyes that made Victoria's heart skip. "Thank you for climbing into my trunk," he said. "You reminded me why I started all this in the first place. You reminded me what passion and courage look like." He moved closer, and Victoria felt the air between them change, charging with possibility. "Victoria," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." "What?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That day at the hotel, I told you I was planning to stop your wedding. That was true. But it wasn't the whole truth." He took a breath. "I'd seen you before, 3 months earlier, at a gallery opening in the city. You were there with Marcus, and you were talking about a painting, really talking about it, with such passion and insight. I was captivated. I asked around about you, learned you were engaged. I told myself to forget about it, that you were taken, and that was that." Victoria's breath caught. "Christopher, when I got that wedding invitation, something in me rebelled," Christopher continued. "I couldn't let you marry him. not just because of what I knew about Marcus, but because— He paused, seeming to gather courage. Because from the moment I saw you talk about that painting, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. And finding you in my trunk felt like fate was giving me a second chance to do the right thing. Victoria's heart was racing. She thought about the past 6 months, the late-night conversations, the shared laughter, the way Christopher made her feel seen in a way no one else ever had. She'd been so focused on rebuilding her life that she hadn't let herself fully acknowledge what was growing between them. "I've been thinking about you too," she admitted. "More than I probably should, given that we're business partners and I'm still technically recovering from almost marrying the wrong person." "Technically," Christopher agreed with a slight smile. "But maybe someday, when you're ready." Victoria made a decision. She'd spent too much of her life being cautious, doing what was expected, waiting for permission. She'd learned that sometimes the best choices were the ones that required a leap of faith, like climbing into a stranger's trunk to escape a wedding. She stepped forward and kissed him. Christopher froze for just a moment in surprise, then his arms came around her, pulling her close. The kiss was gentle but full of promise, the beginning of something real, something chosen, something entirely their own. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Victoria laughed. "So much for waiting until I'm ready," she said. "I'm not complaining," Christopher assured her, his eyes bright with happiness. Victoria looked around her gallery, her dream made real, her life reclaimed, her future full of possibility. She thought about the terrified woman in the wedding dress who had made a desperate choice in a hotel loading area. That moment of panic and courage had led her here, to this life, to this man, to this version of herself she'd never imagined she could become. Sometimes, she thought, the best adventures begin with the most impulsive decisions. Sometimes you have to hide in a trunk to find your way home. "Come on," she said, taking Christopher's hand. "Help me close up. I want to take you to dinner and celebrate." "Celebrate what?" Christopher asked, lacing his fingers through hers. Victoria smiled, feeling happiness bloom in her chest. Genuine, uncomplicated, entirely her own. "Everything," she said, "absolutely everything." And as they walked out of the gallery together into the warm spring evening, Victoria knew with absolute certainty that this was just the beginning. She'd escaped one life and stumbled into another, one she'd chosen, one she'd built, one that was authentically hers. It was, she thought, the happiest ending she could have imagined. And the best part was knowing it was also a beginning.